live in Siesta, Florida. Everything in Florida matters. Siesta matters more. If you decide you like what you see, subscribe. We need subscribers. But here's what your problems are in, whether it's Siesta, Florida, or Timbuktu, New York City, San Francisco, Austin, Texas, everywhere in the South in particular, Atlanta, Georgia, the Mid-South, and South, Charleston, South Carolina. All these places have one problem in common, something that happened in 1787. 1787, wow. It was all about one man, one vote. And the dispute was from the North and the South at the time. The South said, we want one man, one vote, but we want to honor the Constitution. And the Constitution says a non-free person is 3/5 of a person. It's called the 3/5 rule. So slaves, or non-free men, were 3/5 of a person under the law, written in our Constitution by our great owners, those who owned slaves, and those who wrote the law, the landholders, the founders, whether it was Jefferson or Washington, all who held slaves till they died. In any event, the North and the South agreed on we should have one man, one vote. And so saying that, we got to have a meeting. And in those days, Richmond, Virginia was the place of the meeting. The South and the North met in Richmond, Virginia. And whether they argued that one man, one vote thing was in principle a good idea. But if you're going to honor the Constitution and be constitutional, you're going to have to do it a certain way. And they argued for 3 years, from 1787 to 1790. And they settled on a great idea. Not really a great idea, but one that they could settle on reluctantly from the North standpoint and to the benefit of the South. And remember, there was no California in those days. There was no North Dakota, South Dakota. There was no Louisiana Purchase. None of that had happened, at least not to any important extent as far as electing people. So the South won the argument. They said, we want 40% more of the vote because we own slaves. We want that 40% represented by slaves that are 40% of. You got to give us more electors. So they attributed electors to the state according to the slaves and the free men, and settled on the Electoral College to do that. Not a popular vote, an electoral vote by people outside of the general electorate. Remember, the people were poor. A lot of the people were poor, not just slaves being very poor, but the ordinary worker in the fields. It was an agricultural place. Everybody worked in farms and things like that. Those people were looked down on too, but they got one vote if they were free people. So they came up with the Electoral College. And the popular notion about the Electoral College is, well, they had to do this to avoid ignoring the small states. And of course, some people even said, and they had to fly over places. And of course, there were no planes in those days. They ended up with rail under Lincoln later on, 1860, going into the Civil War. But the rail did facilitate the war when it did happen. But the Electoral College went into place, and we've had this thing, this albatross of 1787 to 1790 ever since, wiping out or ignoring and placing the Electoral College over the general population's vote. So what do we got now? We're still doing that after all these years. On top of that, the certification of the Electoral College vote has happened, and each of the disputed states in 2020 have decided that the winner of this election certified is Joe Biden. realize this president lost the popular vote to two different people, Hillary Clinton and now Joe Biden. And yet, because of the Electoral College and the final certification of the vote of the Electoral College is the Congress. And on January 6th, the certification of the electoral vote is going to happen all over again by the Congress. And what can happen in the Congress is what's interesting. What can happen there, because it'll be presided on by the Vice President, Mr. Pence, it will be decided by hand vote and motions and so forth to accept the vote of the Electoral College or not. And believe me, folks, it can be or not. The Senate will act first, and they'll gather together as one group. Both houses will gather together. And the ball game will be played this way. New Mr. Tuberville, Terry Tuberville from Alabama, brand new senator from Alabama, will say, I want to throw out the vote of the 5 disputed states. I want to throw out Georgia. I want to throw out Michigan, Wisconsin, all those states, Pennsylvania. I want to throw them out. They're illegitimate. And I want to follow on to that from my fellow senators here. Please support me in this. Throw them all out. Every one of them. Nevada, throw that out too. And we can keep things as they are. Our president is President Trump. Keep him in place. He's a legitimate president. Keep him where he's at. So let's say this happens, that he gets supported in the Senate. Well, now they separate when they do this vote, and then the House will come back and vote separately. So now let's say this has happened. You people out there who want to keep the president in place are going to be pretty happy about this. Popular vote's ignored. Now the Electoral College is ignored. And now we're going to have the House vote. Well, there's more Democrats in the House than Republicans. However, there are 30 caucuses. There's 50 states, but you only get one vote per state, per caucus. And that goes like this. 30 of the states are controlled in their caucuses by the Republicans, not the Democrats. There's only 20 in the caucus that are Democrat. So if the House goes for eliminating the election and certifying it for Trump, all those votes, the electoral vote, the popular vote, are thrown away. And President Donald Trump will remain president. If no ifs, ands, or buts. What that will cause in the political realm will be quite interesting. And if I'm going to make a prediction, what it will probably cause will be a real call for the elimination of the Electoral College, if that should occur. Believe me, folks, that's not a joke. This is not a made-up story. This is not your imagination working overtime. This is this liberal, fiscal conservative Augi that's saying this. Watch this show. There's more to tell. There's more coming. We'll see you later. Thank you very much.